Hi, and thanks for joining us for another Q&A Friday, a regular series where we chat about issues facing manufacturing companies. I'm Jessica Vauden, a team member here at Mountain Point, and I'm joined by Andrew Reiser, our co-founder and president, and Holland Dotz, our lead Salesforce Pardot and marketing cloud consultant. Hey guys.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So I'm very excited about today's topic because I work in marketing here, and we're going to really dig into some marketing best practices, kind of picking Holland's expertise and his brain. So one thing that I've noticed in working with several manufacturers is that until recently, marketing hasn't necessarily been very high on the list of priorities. Manufacturing companies traditionally seem to have focused more on sales efforts, which of course are also really crucial, but left their marketing efforts more to their channel partners and distributors. Andrew, does that seem fair?
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I think that when we think about manufacturers and the customers that we work with, marketing to them is investments and trade shows and attendance at these larger industry-focused events that they play in. But the more tactical, strategic marketing has traditionally been left to the channel partners, distributors or resellers. And I think a major shift has been occurring for the past several years and is going to continue to occur where the original equipment manufacturer is looking to do better efforts in segmentation and not only work better with their channel partners, but also figure out better ways how to market to the end consumer that is actually using the product.
Okay, so we definitely see manufacturers sort of stepping up their marketing game. Why do you think they're making that shift? Like what's encouraging them to do that?
Personally, I think it's just because the way that technology has evolved and changed and the channels that people are leveraging today. So social media is a great example of that. You have all these multi-channels through social like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. And I think today's buyer is well-versed in leveraging those channels and engaging in those channels. And I think manufacturers are trying to figure out how to have that omni-channel approach.
Okay, so Holland, we're definitely speaking your language. You're our lead consultant for a couple of really cool marketing, automation, and engagement tools that help people manage those many, many channels that we're seeing consumers use. You work with Salesforce Pardot and the Salesforce Marketing Cloud, but I know you've done a lot of work to get up to speed on these, and they're really highly sophisticated platforms. And so if I'm a manufacturer who's not focused much on marketing in the past, jumping into something as robust as Pardot or as Marketing Cloud can be really intimidating. So where would you advise people to start when we talk about, the idea of starting with your people and your processes before they tackle the technology?
It really differs company to company, and starting with the people and the processes is of course where you want to start, but even that varies depending on whether or not you have a person in place already that kind of manages the marketing for the company, or if that's a role that needs established, because sometimes that's the case. There are times when the marketing automation platform comes lumped in with other technologies that are purchased at the same time. And if there's not somebody at the company who has been tapped to manage the project and kind of champion the use of this technology, then a lot of times you're really not going to get much out of the software. So having somebody that's going to lead it in the first place, and then second, kind of determining the processes. I think even more basic than that, it's really just determining what your goals are, what your focus is, and what you hope to achieve out of it. Because I think that's the point where a consultant can really help out, even if you don't have the process all figured out with how exactly you want to execute these initiatives with the software. Having a clear idea of what your goals are and what you hope to get out of your marketing efforts a lot of times is enough to start with, to where a consultant like myself can help you work through that and show you options and how you can achieve that through the software.
Right, because at the end of the day, these are just tools, right? They're not solutions in and of themselves. You have to know where you want to go, know what you want to achieve. And then these tools can help you get there and can help you scale and do things more efficiently and effectively. but they're not a supplement for having a marketing strategy.
Exactly.
Is that a fair? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's one of the big things to keep in mind for companies that are considering it. It's very important to keep in mind that whether it's Pardot or the Marketing Cloud, these are not marketing solutions. They're tools that will help you execute your strategy, automate your strategy, which are really important things, especially when you're talking about doing these things at scale, but without starting with that strategy and having a good idea of the direction to begin with, you're going to have trouble getting as much out of the tool.
Right. So making the most of this investment. So you have a strong marketing background, and tools aside, as we're thinking about the sort of stages of a marketing plan or the implementation of a marketing plan, kind of walk us through what that looks like. So there are some clear steps or tenets that people need to follow if they're going to be successful in a campaign.
Sure. I mean, I think also this can be different from company to company and can certainly vary whatever works best for your business. But I know some stages that tend to work well across the board are a really good starting point. The four we use also internally at Mountain Point are plan, build, execute, and measure. So, I mean, pretty self-explanatory. You want to plan your campaign, have a good idea what you hope to achieve through that in the beginning. Then determine all the different pieces of that you need to be built out. And then, of course, you have your stage where you build those assets, whether it's your Pardot forms or your email templates, landing pages, the graphics, the rich media if you're doing video, for instance, advertisements, everything involved in the campaign. So once those assets are all together, then you're ready to actually execute your campaign. Whenever that campaign has completed its course, then you're able to come back and look at those metrics and just identify what's working, what's not working, so you can adjust and have a better effort the next time.
Yeah, and I think, in school, as marketers, we're taught this process, which I think a lot of people working in marketing take for granted, because even though it seems self-explanatory, I've seen a lot of clients or people that I've worked with kind of jump into the middle of the build piece, for example, without actually doing the planning, or even into the executing piece, just throwing up an ad here or there, or, buying an event sponsorship or something like that without actually thinking, does this fit our overall strategy? So kind of going back to the basics and figuring out where this fits into your overall game plan, I think is super important and something that's easy to overlook or take for granted. One thing that I would probably hit on too, and Holland, I think you can definitely elaborate more on this, even though we talk about this as sort of a linear process, one of the things that we do here at Mountain Point is constantly measure, right? And we're trying to get better about that as well. So even though measure comes at the end in that sort of linear outline, it really should be ongoing from the moment that your campaign is implemented. And you should be monitoring any feedback that you're getting. And you can't constantly tweak, because then you'll not get any meaningful data or meaningful information. But, if you've been running, for example, some digital ads for 2 weeks and you're not really seeing the impact that you would expect, or one ad is doing way better than the other, that's a really great time to adjust, even in the middle of the implementation piece. And Holland, Marketing Cloud and Pardot are really great tools to gain that feedback, right? Can you talk a little bit about how they help you gain that sort of real-time insight?
Yeah, well, both platforms have in-depth reporting. They're both geared towards different targets. So your Pardot's going to be your business to business primarily, although you're certainly communicating with individuals through those email campaigns. It's just not targeted for a customer journey so much like Marketing Cloud is. So you have the ability with Marketing Cloud to really craft these individual one-to-one journeys. But as far as the reporting for both, there's just a vast amount of data available on engagement, everything from clicks to views to history. And I think that's a big part. That vast amount of data is a really helpful asset when it comes to bridging the gap from marketing to sales. So for Pardot, for instance, having access to Pardot Engage, the B2B marketing analytics, and having those Pardot activities visible on the lead or prospect record in Salesforce is going to give your sales reps really great insight into what marketing campaigns your lead or prospect has been engaging with recently. And it's just going to give you a really good way to steer the conversation into something that's going to be more meaningful.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point that you brought up. I think, in the past there have been really clear delineations between the marketing team, who's responsible for communicating information and sort of generating demand and leads, and the sales team, who is responsible for actually nurturing and closing deals. And we're seeing those lines become increasingly blurred. And I think that's a great thing, right? Because there used to sort of be this big black box between us where marketing may be generating leads, but then sales has no idea the history of them or where they came from, or maybe, marketing thinks they're handing off great leads to sales, and then sales is like, these people are not interested in my product at all. So cutting down those barriers and those tearing down those silos, I think is immensely helpful in, taking a marketing strategy and a sales strategy to the next level.
Absolutely. I think it's definitely becoming more and more important. And I think it's also worth considering, like, it's really your sales reps who have the closest relationship with the customer. So it's really important to bring them in when developing these marketing strategies, because they can provide excellent insights as to what's actually going to work well and what the customer would hope to see. So rather than marketing kind of being in their own box and handing over these leads as they're created, being able to talk with your experienced sales reps and finding out what's really working best and what's resonating with the customer base is really going to help shape those marketing efforts.
I think that's a great point. I think at a minimum, I think your sales director should be involved very heavily in any marketing efforts, and vice versa. Your marketing director should really be communicating with your sales director pretty consistently to make sure that this sort of end-to-end system of engagement is actually working, so that we're not creating holes in this pipeline. That kind of brings me to another idea that, Andrew, you and I have talked about, and I know, Holland, you've been part of these conversations as well. We've seen this sort of trend of, for a long time, people were able to sort of outsource their marketing efforts to agencies or to contractors. But now we're seeing more and more manufacturing teams bring that back in-house. And I think really it's a lot to do with this idea of creating a very consistent message and a very consistent presence across the board. And again, tearing down those silos. Can you talk a little bit more about what's driving that, and maybe some of the trends that you're seeing whenever you're talking to manufacturers about this issue?
So I think you're spot on. I think that we're seeing, specifically with manufacturers, exactly what you described. And again, I think the reoccurring themes are breaking down silos, cross-organization collaboration, leveraging data, and figuring out how these tools are going to work in this world of Industry 4.0. So specifically, kind of the trends that we're seeing all kind of tie back to this notion of speaking the language. So I think that the manufacturing marketing playbook, if you will, is still kind of in flux and being built now because of all the different channels that manufacturers typically touch. So whether it's selling through channel partners and distributors and retailers, whether it's selling direct to consumer, or a combination of both, I think that having a solid strategy around all of that incorporates the different aspects and areas of the business, so breaking down those silos and measuring what's involved in that, but more importantly, the customer journey. So how do we make doing business with us easier? And when you think about segmentation, I think that there's a lot of different customer journeys and segments that occur in this manufacturing space, which traditionally I think it has made it hard to kind of not only leverage a tool or leverage an agency, but now bringing this back in-house and leveraging marketing automation tools. This is front and center of every engagement that we have going on right now. So it's getting beyond hey, we have trade shows that are coming up. How do we have a marketing strategy around that? And it's getting down into the weeds of each of those specific journeys and engagements with not only the end consumer, but also those channel partners. So it's a pretty exciting time now, and kind of blurring those lines and making things clear. And our advice to our customers is not to bite off more than you can chew. We've already touched upon the framework of plan, build, execute, measure. And I think the key is keeping it simple and really thinking through each of those strategies, and then coming up with a game plan for how you're going to apply that and measure that. And that's usually our advice going into it is, yes, there's a whole lot that you can tackle from a marketing standpoint, but if your data is not accurate and you're unable to segment that data, then you've got to start with the basics. And so we usually start there and just kind of open up the conversations to gauge that maturity level of the organization from a marketing standpoint, and then plan out the roadmap of how we can get them maximizing not only their strategy, but also the tools that are involved in it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I think one of the things that you mentioned that really hit home with me is, we have such varied channels and such a variety of partners in the manufacturing space. And then we also have such a variety of consumers. And so, we're not in a sort of spray and pray environment in marketing anymore, where you can't just send out one blast message and hope that it catches people's attention and they'll come to you. Competition has become so intense that you really have to differentiate, and you really have to speak to the individual types of people that your company serves. And I think that's a topic for a whole other discussion, and this idea of really problem solving for your prospects and delivering the right information at the right time, and the whole concept of inbound marketing. But I think the overarching concept here is that tools like Pardot and Marketing Cloud can help the people who have this expertise internally translate that at scale and share that at scale with a really wide variety of audiences, and make sure that it's relevant and meaningful and timely to those audiences. So Holland or Andrew, any final thoughts before we wrap up?
I just wanted to touch on what you were just saying as far as the segmentation. I think, that's one of the strongest features of Pardot, and able to have that connection with Salesforce to where you can, whether it's through Salesforce campaigns or reports, kind of determine what criteria you want to filter on and build your lists of specific targets that you can really know that your marketing efforts are going to land in the right spot, because you've got that wealth of data within the system. They're able to pull that together and kind of curate your lists. I think that's one of the greatest features of having a marketing automation platform that ties directly to Salesforce, so you can leverage that CRM data to really know you're sending the right message to the right person.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, then when they're handed off to your sales team, they have the complete history of all the messaging they've received in the past, and what assets, whether it's an ebook or a webinar they've interacted with, so the sales folks really have a good idea of the mindset or their prospect is in, or the problem that they're trying to solve, which I think is hugely valuable in having those conversations with them to try to convert them into clients or customers.
Exactly. And not even just seeing what all has been done, but even steps to include that in the automation. There's a key activity you really want to watch for, and you want to send a notification to your sales rep as soon as the prospect or lead or contact takes that action. And of course, that's all available within the system too. I think those are the big pieces of automation that are really helpful when you know there's a specific action that you want to watch for. Whether it's downloading a price sheet on a new product or any such activity, you're going to be able to immediately notify your sales rep once that happens.
Yeah. So higher intelligence at scale, I think, is a really good summary of what these tools offer. Well, guys, thanks a lot for chatting with me today. I'm sure Holland and I could talk about this all day, and I'm sure we'll have additional Q&A Fridays in the future where we dig further into marketing concepts. For those of you who are listening, if you have a specific question you'd like us to answer or another topic you would like us to tackle, please let us know. We're also really eager to hear your feedback. So hit us up on social or post your thoughts in the comments on our videos. And as always, guys, thank you again and happy Friday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Friday.